Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to give you a couple of updates that we've had so far about the 9/11 Commission case at Guantanamo Bay. And there's been some pretty big news, but um, news that probably isn't going to shock you as I'll relate. But before I get into the specifics, I might as well talk about the basics. And for those who don't know what's going on about what's happening at Guantanamo Bay, well, we have 5 men currently held in detention at the Guantanamo Bay prison in Cuba. And these are Khalid Sheikh Muhammad, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Tawfiq bin Attash, also known as Khalad, um, Amar al-Baluchi, and Mustafa al-Hassawi. All 5 men have links to Al-Qaeda, which was a terrorist organization once led by the deceased Osama bin Laden. And the 5 men are being charged for their participation, planning, and logistical support for the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. The charges, which carry the death penalty, include conspiracy, murder, in violation of the war on terrorism, and all the defendants are accused of directing or training the hijackers or helping provide them money or assistance with travel. Now, the trial, which has been ongoing for the last 15 years, um, there was a trial that was supposed to start on January 11th of 2021, but before the coronavirus pandemic happened, this trial was going to take place at that date. And then the pandemic happened and threw everything into a quandary. Basically had to postpone. Um, the defendants were arraigned on May 5th, 2012, and the case was still in pretrial phase and had expired. It basically experienced uh, many delays throughout the last 10 years, basically. Anywhere from illegal wiretapping of the defendants' lawyers in these rooms that they had, where it's supposed to have confidentiality agreements. Um, Judges that would just basically quit. I mean, we're up to the fourth judge. And according to the Defense Services Office Training Division on their website, which I'm going to link at the below, the new judge is Colonel Matthew McCall, who actually was a law clerk in Hawaii at the time of the attacks and became the fourth judge to handle the case. I think one had to leave because of conflicting arguments. Another one left because he chose to retire, and the third one, I think he basically filled in on administrative basis and then recused himself or retired. But it's like it's ridiculous. They've outlasted 4 judges on this case, and that's basically because of due to one major thing: is that all these 5 defendants are basically tortured. And I'll save you the details. They were tortured mercilessly. And with Mustafa Hausawi, it was basically sexual abuse and just waterboarded. I mean, Khalid Sheikh Muhammad was waterboarded 173 times. And that's an absurd amount. So even if they were guilty and they admitted that they're wrong, and they already have, just to give you a little bit of information, Khalid Sheikh Muhammad and Ramzi bin al-Shib, before they were captured, held a interview with Yoshri Fudo, who's a reporter for Al Jazeera and a highly credible reporter, basically told him in Pakistan in a safe house that they were responsible for these attacks. Yoshri Fudo made a short series called Rose to 9/11 and basically talked about the lead up to 9/11 in his meeting with Khalid Sheikh Muhammad and Ramzi bin al-Shib in that safe house in Pakistan. So they get captured. Ramzi bin al-Shib first, and then I think a month later it was Khalid Sheikh Muhammad. And basically, they were tortured mercilessly by the CIA under authorization of the Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld from the Bush White House to their legal counsel, who called it enhanced interrogation techniques, which is a fancy word for torture. The CIA employed the SEER program, which basically was survival, evade, resistance, and escape, which was meant for U.S. soldiers who were captured in battle, not to give information that would be helpful in lending the enemy state secrets or national security secrets. So they employed this to the detainees who were considered terrorists. And basically, these measures were brutal. And I did an interview with the great Mark Fallon, who basically talked about this in his book, Unjustifiable Means. And I would suggest everybody buy that book. It's a great book. It talked about the SEER program and the foundation of it in its inception and what led to it. And he basically told, and it was a great interview with Mark Fallon. Mark Fallon, Cal Rosenberg, and Alka Pradhan are basically the best. And I would suggest anybody follow them on Twitter regarding Guantanamo Bay and 9/11 updates in the country. I would even say in the world. The three best advocates for information relating to torture program and the Guantanamo Bay prison trial and the pre-trial anyway, and the updates with it. So you have a number of judges. You have these 5 men who are basically part of Al-Qaeda and this conspiracy to attack the United States. They're mercilessly tortured, and you don't know if they're guilty or not because we really can't take their information at face value. Maybe that's the reason why the CIA did this. Well, what I want to show you next is the court calendar, which basically is the calendar for the trial. And as you can see, this is from the Office of Military Commissions. This is May 2023, where the trial, the first hearing was taking place. And as you can see, canceled. The whole entire month is canceled. And it's really of concern that are we ever going to get a trial at this point? Now, according to Carol Rosenberg, the military judge, McCall, has canceled May's session in the 9/11 case, and he held open for a possible hearing for Ramzi bin al-Shibh, and McCall would write, quote, there is no longer a realistic potential for litigation to occur during the May 8 to 26 timeframe. However, again, according to Carol Rosenberg, she writes in the New York Times that in today's cancellation order, the judge also instructed prosecutors to continue providing him with biweekly updates as to the status of the policy principles until the prosecution has been informed that a decision has been reached. The next hearing is for the 9/11 case is on the court calendar for June 26th to July 21st. And if you want to follow more about these updates, I'll link it in the bottom description, the trial guide in which Cal Rosenberg writes every time there's an update at the New York Times. So we have had, supplemental hearings, which basically happened on yesterday, the defense motion to cancel the pretrial hearings. And just 3 days ago, Ramzi bin al-Shibh's 19 status update pursuant to AE 1SOFFF. And basically, you can't look at that document because it is going through a security review per the 2011 regulation for trial by military commission, Chapter 19, Section 4. And just last month, in the month of March, you've had government night motions for extension of time to comply with the ruling and order by Mr. bin Shibh's motion to compel production of CIA records related to Camp 7, which is basically talking about his tortures. And, we've had a number of Al-Qaeda operatives, some of them alleged to be Al-Qaeda, who go through these torture sessions by the CIA in black sites overseas, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Egypt, Jordan, Germany, Poland. And you have these black sites like detention site blue and detention site green. And basically, the two people responsible for the SEER program, Bruce Jessens and James Mitchell, they already gave testimony about how they don't feel any worse for wear regarding what they've done. Actually, James Mitchell basically says that he did the country a favor and he would do it again because they saved the country from potential attacks. And later on, when it came to the Office of the Inspector General report, and later on, you had basically a commission that investigated the which was the Senate Select Committee program in investigating the CIA detention and interrogation program. Well, they basically said that nothing was procured from these people about potential attacks that they already didn't know about, CIA. So what are they talking about? Well, I don't know what really is going on. Why are they torturing these people to begin with? Was it to procure information? Well, the CIA should know from history, and they've had a long history when it comes to torture, that torture doesn't produce information that would be beneficial to the torturer. And they've had decades to figure this out. In fact, the CIA even wrote a paper back in the 1960s, I believe, about the inadequacies of torture. That's from the CIA. So why did they torture these people? Well, if you ask for my opinion, and this is my unexperienced opinion, I basically would say that they did this so that the public wouldn't know definitively whether they were guilty or not. So I happen to believe, and I'm not sure, but I think Khalid Sheikh Muhammad, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, and the rest of them at the Guantanamo 5 at least did plan and operate 9/11, but that the intelligence services knew about this beforehand. That's the speculation, but I can argue pretty good for it. However, like I said before, even if they really are guilty, you wouldn't know that because they're tortured, and everything they say, every word they said, has to come under doubt by everyone involved, me, you, the whole public. And so we're left in a state of paralysis, right, where we can't act on this information. Now, what the government is hoping, and I think this is going to happen, is that either that they die in custody, or the next best thing is that the deal that is currently being undertaken by the Biden administration, that is the prosecution, which is the federal government, is going to all these lawyers for these Guantanamo 5 and basically saying, here's the deal. We'll take the death penalty off the table, but your clients have to produce a guilty statement regarding every aspect of the 9/11 attacks. Now, this is the worrisome part. If this case does come down to an agreement, and this doesn't go to trial, my worry is that we will never know, in this time frame that is, whether the government had all the evidence at their disposal, or they had some of the evidence, or didn't have any evidence whatsoever. Because whatever evidence that they have, little or many, will be locked away in the National Archives for the next 30, 40 years. By then, everyone's dead. If they didn't have evidence, well, how will we know? They could basically lie and say, well, we have that information locked away in the National Archives. However, with the trial, we'll publicly know. We'll know what they had or didn't have. So you can understand my cause for concern here. And with the goal of the federal government is so that Khalid Sheikh Muhammad, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, Tawfiq bin Attash, Mustafa Hawsawi, and Omar al-Baluchi all plead guilty and spend the rest of their natural lives in prison. This would avoid a death penalty trial and the problem plagued case would finally end. A case that should have been at the Southern District of New York, where it belonged, because that's where they initially attacked. Now, the current judge, McCall, backed this effort from the prosecution and canceled all the public hearings for the past 12 months so that lawyers could focus on negotiating. That says a lot right there. So, you have this judge, I forgot his name before McCall, the one that just recused himself for personal reasons, and basically was the one canceling these public hearings for the next 12 months in order for negotiations to take focus. And I don't know, this just leads to speculation here, right? Whether he's getting pressure from the State Department, the CIA, about not forcing the issue of a trial because of the lack of evidence that they have, or that the ultimate fear for the prosecution is that all 5 of these guys are let go because nothing they said under duress of torture can be used in court. This is the reason why it's taken so long for this trial to commence. As that's a huge reason of it, right? So you have pressure from these lawyers who are salivating at the mouth for a trial because they know. And also you have these human rights organizations and these forensic psychologists and former lawyers who are basically saying that even if a trial were to take place, there would be a huge percentage of them being found not guilty because of the CIA torturing these people. And here's another problem, is that the public perception is that they won't blame the CIA. I mean, they'll blame it temporarily, but they won't blame it where they should be. I have posted time and again dozens, up to maybe even 100 videos about how the CIA basically impeded not just the FBI, but the State Department in monitoring 2 Al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States that they knew of. The NSA knew this too. And they covered it up and lied about it at the Joint House Inquiry 9/11 Commission. And basically, the media won't cover this because we know why. And also, the 9/11 Truth Movement was besieged with fringe conspiracy theories, and basically, this was ignored. Not initially. You had good people like Paul Thompson, Kevin Fenton, Ray Nowolski, John Duffy, John Gold, Robbie and Abby Martin, Kevin Fenton. We had good people. Kyle Hentz, John Judge, good people that were talking about these issues involving the intelligence services actually lying and covering up the fact that, they were seemingly protecting these 2 guys. And who knows whether the muscle hijackers were under the same protection. Seems to be that way anyway. But nevertheless, nobody talks about it. And that's what I think is going to happen here. The CIA's torture program, which was a horrible, rendition torture program, was a horrible program. And basically, it's now, being replaced by the COVID pandemic and currently the Trump trial. And listen, everything that we're experiencing now isn't from COVID, isn't from the trial of Trump. It's basically from 9/11. And basically, we need more people to talk about this stuff. Now, you had a lot of these victims' families who are being ignored. Their voices are being ignored about this trial taking place. And they're the ones who really deserve justice because their loved ones were killed. Now, the U.S. federal government, no matter who it is, Republican or Democrat, have kept information hidden from law firms like Motley Weiss, Creedley and Creedler, from a civil suit towards Saudi Arabia for their logistical and funding support of 9/11 hijackers like Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Hani Anjur. That's not speculation. It's now a fact because under the latest executive order 11010, which was Operation Encore, an FBI operation that followed up Pent Bomb investigation, which showed now, which was ordered last year to be declassified, released. Barely anyone reported. I did. I tried my best. I'm not a reporter. But we now have information that the Saudi government was involved with the logistical and support of Saudi officials inside the United States who gave funding and logistical support to two al-Qaeda operatives who were involved with the 9/11 attacks. 3. Now, President Biden has been publicly silent about the negotiations. No shock there. Here's a man who voted for the Iraq War. So much for being a progressive, huh, leftists? Now, Biden's current focus regarding the 9/11 case appears to be releasing prisoners unrelated to the 9/11 case, like Majid Khan. People who have never been criminally charged and are cleared to leave by the military commission. And that the status of 17 of the 31 remaining at Guantanamo Bay are still being investigated by the military commissions. Cumulatively, approximately about 750, I think, prisoners have been passed through Guantanamo since 2002, with the majority of them, 3/4 of them, being free. One such prisoner, Abazo Betan, the first al-Qaeda operative to be captured, is a forever prisoner labeled by the military commission because he could be a threat to the United States, even though the CIA came out later in 2006 at the New York Times and basically, the Chicago Tribune, and basically said to Abazo Betan, well, sorry, we tortured you. We found out you're not number 3 in al-Qaeda, nor are you a high-ranking member. But we still consider you a danger and will label you a forever prisoner. The problem is, for the other detainees who were released, they got to find a country for them to go back to because a lot of these countries don't want them back. And the problems that come with them. Now, when it comes to the current day, well, let's go back a month, March. Biden basically released 4 prisoners. 1 to Pakistan, 1 to Belize, and the other one went to Saudi Arabia. The one that went to Saudi Arabia had a long history of being at Guantanamo Bay. And that was Ghassan Abdullah al-Sharbi. There was another one that went to Saudi Arabia, I believe. I could be wrong about the country, and his name escapes me. Muhammad al-Qatari, I believe his name was. And he basically, Muhammad al-Qatani, Sharbi was released last month. Qatani was basically released back. I think he was from Saudi Arabia. And he was another one alleged to be a 20th hijacker, just like Zacharias Moussaoui. Qatani tried to enter the United States, and I believe he was in Miami, Florida, actually. And I think Muhammad Attawa was waiting for him, if I'm right. He flew to Orlando, Florida, and that he was questioned by somebody who testified in the 9/11 commission. Jose Melendez, that's right. He testified in the 9/11 commission. He was questioned by an an immigration officer named Jose Melendez. And much like with the other hijackers, the muscle hijackers, he couldn't tell you who he was meeting, how he could support himself. He only had $2,500 to his name. And he was using a one-way ticket. So this guy was screaming to, suspicious, right? So he was sent back to Saudi Arabia. Now, that's right. This is not the guy who was meeting Muhammad Atta, was somebody else. But this guy was captured in Tora Bora, and he was shipped to the Americans in June of 2002, and he was at Guantánamo Bay detention camp since then. But he was released. There's another guy who was brutally tortured and recanted his position. And in the fall of 2006, Congress passed the Military Commissions Act of 2006. Now, this poor guy, he tried to commit suicide, failed. Went before a joint review task force in 2013. Had his federal appeals in 2014, and then was released to Dubai. Abazo Betan is still being held in Guantanamo Bay without charge. I mean, this whole thing is a disgusting showcase of morbid justice or perverted sense of justice. This ain't justice. This is a quasi-perversion of hiding the fact that the federal government is covering for the CIA, the NSA, the Saudi intelligence arm, the General Intelligence Directorate, and the Israeli Mossad about their operations pre-9/11 in collecting intelligence about operatives that were inside the United States and probably conducting terrorist attacks that went completely ignored. I've interviewed some FBI whistleblowers like Ken Williams, Mark Rossini, who basically tried to warn their superiors about terrorists that were inside the United States, but they couldn't, or that with Ken Williams, nobody read his memo, which is the Phoenix memo, as it's called, where he basically warned the FBI to start conducting an investigation into Arabs with fundamentalist ties training at flight schools. Hardly anyone read that memo. Mark Rossini, who was working out of the CIA's virtual station, Alex station, and Doug Miller, his associate from the FBI, New York Counterterrorism, basically read a cable that saw that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, two known al-Qaeda operatives, were coming to the United States with dual U.S. visas. Couldn't share that information with the FBI. And then when the CIA testified to this fact, Alfreda Ambakowski gave closed-door testimony that's not made to the public, and basically said that she walked over that information to the FBI's Washington, D.C. office, but there's no record of her ever going into that office. She lied and got away with it. Michelle Ann Casey, a CIA analyst under the direction of the deputy director of the Bin Laden Issue Station, codename Alex Station, Tom Wilshire, told Mark Rossini, said, you can't share that information about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi because it's not for the FBI to know, because we think the next attack is in Southeast Asia, which is not the district, a district under the Department of Justice. Because if Michelle Ann Casey says that, yes, share that information with the FBI, well, now that case goes to the FBI, and they can interfere with the CIA's own operation of monitoring these two guys. So when it comes to guilt, I think there's some guilt for Al-Qaeda. Is it a total guilt? I couldn't tell you definitively. And the real crime of this is that we are left to our own desires, not led with the facts or information. Information is power. I mean, you need not look at the Epstein case to know about what the intelligence services, who I think are the most powerful services in the world, because they have information on you, me, and everybody else. That's why the signals intelligence divisions of Israel, the United States, Russia, China, these are powerful countries. Great Britain, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, some of the biggest signals intelligence services in the world are now all sharing information with one another without walls, without warrant, without your say or mine. Every aspect of our lives is being shared with all the intelligence services around the world. Just imagine how much power that is. Emails, text messages, phone calls, internet search history, everything. Everything about you and me is being collected and stored. With the NSA, it's at the Utah Data Center in Pine Bluff, Utah. Well, why? Well, maybe one day in the future, this information will come back to be used against us, to subjugate us, to malign us, persecute us for voting wrong, for looking at information that may be deemed a threat to national security, that may be deemed a threat to the power structure. These are not conspiracies. These are rational scenarios. Why else would they want to know everything about you? To control you, to lord over you. And that's where the power comes in. Information collected by the intelligence services. Well, there was enough to stop 9/11. And if you listen to actual whistleblowers like Thomas Drake, a whistleblower for the NSA, he was the former senior executive of the NSA. And I've said this ad nauseum, that the NSA had amassed so much information about the 9/11 hijackers that they could have stopped 9/11 altogether if it was shared. Now, I can't tell you that they had read all the information. I would probably behoove you that they probably read a lot of it. I don't know if they read all of it. I couldn't tell you definitively. But the house that they were monitoring, the safe house for Al-Qaeda safe house in Yemen, was under monitoring for 5 years prior to 9/11. Bin Laden was using a satellite phone. He was using that for 5 years, 6 years, even longer, so maybe even 9. Imagine how much information was collected from it. So, are we ever going to get a trial? I'm still going to hold out hope, but that hope is dwindling. And if we don't get enough public feedback, well, then an agreement's going to be made with the prosecution. A deal will be reached. These men will probably be sent to foreign countries to live out the rest of their days in a prison cell. And whatever evidence or lack thereof from the U.S. federal government regarding information relating to the 9/11 attacks will be stored for the next 30, 40 years in the National Archives. We need more voices to talk about this subject. Have a good night, everybody.